From a distance, it looks like a simple rescue. An exhausted nurse falls and a stranger catches her. But this story is not about rescue. It is about the moment violence loses its grip on a woman who has mistaken survival for living. As Lena Carter slips on a New York subway platform, the world quietly reveals its cruelest truth. Sometimes the first step out of abuse is not rebellion, but collapse.
All right, check it. When your life is a total dumpster fire, staying alive stops being an instinct and becomes a straight-up choice. And sometimes a rando makes it for you. Lena Carter wasn't holding out for a hero, not a chance. But after a 16-hour hospital grind with a psycho waiting at home, the dirty floor wasn't what caught her. It was him. Adrian Valente, a guy who swims in a darkness she can't even fathom. And what he clocked on her bruised face that night was about to change the whole game. She has zero clue. But this rescue is going to be a million times rougher than just surviving. If that's your jam, you better hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. For 16 hours, the garbage lights of Mount C's emergency room had been cooking Lena's eyeballs. Her feet were screaming bloody murder in shoes she couldn't afford to replace 3 months back. The coffee she downed at hour 12 was now just acid, burning a hole in her stomach, and her hands were shaking as she finished the paperwork on a monster double shift. "You look like actual death, Carter," some ER doctor named Marcus mumbles, not even slowing down. Maybe there was a flash of concern, but he didn't break his stride. "Nobody ever stops here. They're all just trying not to go under." "Thanks, Marcus. You're a true friend." Her own thoughts were completely flat, the fight just gone. There was a time she could still make a sarcastic comment, even running on empty. But that was before. Before Ethan, before her apartment became a war zone, and before not dying was the only thing on her to-do list. She punches the clock at 11:47 p.m., a full 13 minutes shy of midnight, not even thinking about unpaid overtime. What's the point, right? The hospital was running on fumes and a prayer. The city was tapped out, and nurses like her were the duct tape holding the whole mess together. The second she stepped outside, the November wind smacked her across the face. Cold enough to sting, but not cold enough for a blizzard. Her flimsy 3-year-old thrift shop coat was a total joke against the gale blowing down East 100th Street. The bus was the smart move, dropping her just 2 blocks from her spot in Washington Heights. But the fare was $2.75, and her bank account was at a measly $11.32. So yeah, it's the subway. It's a 12-minute walk to the 103rd Street station. Lena counts the seconds, partly to stay conscious and partly to block out the dread of what was coming. Ethan would be there. He's always there now. Ever since he lost that construction gig he barely showed up for. And he would be lit. He was always lit by this time. And he'd have his little interrogation ready about her night, the men she was with, why her job made her think she was so much better than him. His interrogations were never chill. Her phone vibrating in her pocket is all the proof she needs. She doesn't have to look. It's him. The text storm started around hour 14. A straight-up flood of messages, each one getting nastier, demanding why she was silent, accusing her of whatever drama his drunk brain was inventing. She learned a while back that responding just adds fuel to the fire. Ignoring him does too, but at least her silence bought her a couple hours of quiet before she walked into the Category 5 hurricane. The station pretty much just sucks her in. The yellowed tiles are sweating straight-up filth, and the air is a gross cocktail of pee and hot garbage. A train screams somewhere down the tunnel, which could mean 2 minutes or 20. For a Wednesday, the platform has a decent crowd. Some teenagers are dying laughing at one end. Some guy in a wrinkled suit is swaying on his feet, completely hammered. 2 women in different scrubs are leaning against a pole, their conversation low and exhausted. Lena finds a spot in the middle of it all, dropping her backpack on the ground. The relief that zings through her shoulders is instant and insane. Her entire existence is in that backpack. An extra pair of socks, an empty water bottle, 3 granola bars she's been making last since Monday, and a trashy romance novel she's been too drained to crack open in 6 weeks. She used to love to read, to escape into worlds where everything gets wrapped up in 300 pages. But real life isn't a book. Real life is this: a sketchy subway platform at midnight, an exhaustion so deep her bones feel like they're about to turn to dust, and a dude at home who's probably going to use his fists to say hello. And in 11 hours, she gets to do it all over again. The platform starts to feel like it's tilting. Lena blinks hard, fighting the black spots in her vision. When did she eat last? That granola bar at 6? Or was that yesterday? The days were just one big ugly blur, a repeating cycle of work, terror, and a tiredness so heavy it was practically a second person. She needs to sit. The thought is weirdly clinical, her nurse brain just ticking off a checklist of her own symptoms. Dizziness, shaky hands, a cold sweat in the humid air. Her vision is tunneling, textbook symptoms of, and the platform lurches again. But way harder this time. No. A tiny part of her brain registers. The platform is steady. She's not. Lena's knees just fold, and the filthy concrete rushes up to kiss her. In that one tiny moment, her only thoughts are about how disgusting the tiles are, that her scrubs are toast, and that Ethan will absolutely lose it when she comes home dirty. But she never hits the deck. Instead, there are hands, strong, solid, that just pluck her out of the air like she's a feather. For a split second, she wonders if she hallucinated it. Then a voice cuts through the mental static. "Easy, I've got you." It's a man's voice, and it's dead calm. The kind of voice that has no idea what panic is, like he does this every day, or nothing on earth could surprise him. Lena's vision snaps back. She's on her feet, propped up by a complete stranger who just materialized and caught her. Her first thought is all about the money. A wool coat that looks like it costs more than her rent. Leather shoes from a shop she couldn't even breathe near. A watch that sparkles in the crappy station light like it's made of stars. Then her eyes hit his face. And suddenly, none of the price tags matter. He's not handsome like a model. His face is too hard for that. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that looks like it was carved from a rock, and a nose that has definitely been broken before. Dark hair is slicked back from a face that could be 30 or 45. But it's his eyes that just vacuum the air right out of her lungs. They were gray, like a storm just about to break. Eyes that saw literally everything and gave away nothing. And right now, those eyes are dissecting her face with an intensity that makes her want to bolt, but she can't move. "You fainted," the stranger says, his voice flat. It wasn't a question. "I'm fine." The lie is pure reflex, a survival skill she's honed after years of trying to be invisible, to be less trouble, to be easy to ignore. "You can let go. I'm fine." But his grip doesn't ease up at all. "When was the last time you ate?" The question is so direct, so random that she actually tells the truth. 6 maybe, a granola bar." 6? He says the word like he's never heard it before. "It's almost midnight. I worked a double." That explains the scrubs. His gaze drops, doing a quick clinical scan. Not creepy, just assessing. It's a look she knows, but this is a full inventory. When his eyes come back to hers, something in them has definitely flipped. and her stomach just drops out. A fear that has nothing to do with low blood sugar. He saw them. The bruises. She had been so freaking meticulous. The layers of concealer around her eye where Ethan's ring had split the skin 3 days ago. The long sleeves hiding the grip marks on her arms. The turtleneck under her scrubs. But this guy, in his rich guy coat and with those storm gray eyes, he read her whole life story in less than 30 seconds. "I'm fine," Lena bites out, twisting from his grasp with enough force that he has to drop her. She stumbles back against a pillar. "Thanks for catching me. I was just dizzy. I'm fine." "That's the 3rd time you've said that." He doesn't step forward, but he doesn't step back either. He just stands there, watching her with those eyes that miss nothing. People who are actually fine don't usually have to say it 3 times. "Well, maybe I wanted to make sure you were paying attention." "I got it." There's a beat of silence. "I just don't believe you." Further down the platform, the teens are still cracking up. The drunk guy is now shouting at the wall. And all around them, the city is screaming its usual song of sirens and car horns. The classic sound of being alone in New York City. Every single nerve ending is screaming at Lena to just run. Grab her bag, melt into the shadows, and put miles between her and this man who sees way, way too much. She should not be standing here, letting him look at her like she's a puzzle he's about to solve. But her legs feel like overcooked pasta, the black spots are still dancing, and moving 10 feet feels like a marathon. "Which train are you waiting for?" The man's voice is a low rumble. "An A train," Lena snaps back, trying to sound like she's got it together. The A, it runs every 7 to 12 minutes this late, on a good night. "You heading uptown to the Heights?" He just gives a slight nod, a silent confirmation of some equation he's running in his head. "That's a 40-minute ride minimum. You're not gonna make it that far." "I will." "You won't." He wasn't even arguing, just laying down the law. His voice was cold, packed with absolute certainty. "You're shivering, your energy is crashing, and your posture is a dead giveaway you're in agony. You need heat, calories, and to get off your feet. A medic would be smart, but I bet you'd refuse." Lena just glared at him. "Are you a doctor?" "Nope." "Then stop acting like one on the platform." The faintest smirk appeared on his lips. Fair point. But that doesn't mean I'm wrong. And he wasn't. That was the most rage-inducing part of this whole mess. Lena felt her final reserves of strength just draining away. A bone-deep chill was setting in, ignoring the station's humid air. Now that the shock was gone, every single bruise was screaming bloody murder. She'd either pass out on the ride, or worse, get home conscious and have to face Ethan looking this busted. The mystery man pulls out a phone. A seriously high-end model, the type Lena's seen chief surgeons carry. He fires off a text in seconds, then his eyes lock back on her. "My ride is 2 blocks away. My driver can be curbside in 3 minutes. Give me 20 minutes for some food and a moment's rest. After that, if home is still the plan, he'll take you wherever you need to go. No strings, no hidden agenda, just a hot meal and a chair." But every survival skill Lena picked up in 3 different foster homes was screaming code red. Guys with this much polish don't do favors for free. They don't just stop your fall and offer a private car service out of nowhere. There's an angle. There's always an angle. But the exhaustion. It was a physical weight crushing her will. She was just so sick of the fear, the hunger, and the lie that her house was safe. Why? The question was barely a whisper. The man's stone-cold look softened just a fraction. "Because," he said, his voice dropping. I know the look of someone with no good options left. And I can't just do nothing when I can actually help. Before Lena could even form a thought, the tunnel blazed with headlights. The A train roared into the station, brakes groaning, doors hissing wide. The platform crowd surged forward, teens shoved by. A drunk stumbled into a car, but the stranger was a statue, his gaze fixed on her, waiting for her call. Lena looked at the train, at the doors that led back to her apartment, to Ethan, to the same unending nightmare. Then she met the stranger's eyes. 20 minutes, she heard herself say. Then I have to get home. The lie felt like poison. Home was the last place on this planet she wanted to be, but it was all she could manage. He gave a single, decisive nod. 20 minutes. He motioned to the exit, falling into step beside her as she got her bag. Behind them, the train doors chimed a warning and slid shut. The A train departed, leaving Lena Carter walking into the night with a man she didn't even know. The stairs were like climbing a cliff face. Each step was a battle, forcing her trembling legs upward. The stranger shadowed her, not touching, but close enough to be a silent guarantee he'd catch her. His presence was intense, but he looked straight ahead, giving her the illusion of space. The November chill was a straight-up punch to the gut, way worse than before. Lena's jaw began to chatter uncontrollably. Her body had quit listening to her. A black sedan was idling at the curb, its slick body shouting a kind of money that nearly made Lena turn and bolt. A man in a tailored suit, around 60, stood by the car, his face carved from stone. Adrian, the driver said, totally casual. Not sir, not Mr. Valente, just the name. So, the stranger's name was Adrian. Marcus. Plans are different. We have to make a stop before hitting the office. Marcus's eyes flicked to Lena, a swift, cold inventory, just like his boss's. He took in the scrubs, the fatigue, the damage she was trying to downplay. But unlike Adrian, his expression was a total blank. He simply nodded and opened the door. Where to? Somewhere quiet. A 24-hour spot with actual food, not just coffee. I have a place. Adrian gestured for Lena to get in. She froze, every past red flag waving in her mind. But that the wind knifed through her jacket, her knees went weak, and a warm car versus a frozen sidewalk was no longer a debate. The car's interior was an embrace of leather and the quiet scent of a different life. The seats were heated. As Lena melted into the cushion, a sound like a broken sob lodged in her throat. When was the last time she'd known this kind of comfort? Adrian sat beside her, leaving a wide gap between them. Marcus shut the door, the engine humming to life without a sound, a world away from a clattering bus or Ethan's beat-up Civic. As they pulled out, Lena watched the city blur past. She knew she ought to be terrified. She should be clocking the route, plotting an escape, bracing for the worst-case scenario. But for the first time in an age, she was warm and seated, and her wrecked body voted that nothing else mattered. How long have you been a nurse? Adrian's voice sliced through the haze. Lena turned to look at him. In the car's dim glow, she could make out the lines by his eyes, a touch of silver in his dark hair. He was perfectly motionless, like a man who had trained himself to eliminate every wasted movement. 4 years, she said. Well, 3 years and 8 months, if you want to be precise. Do you like it, did she? Lena couldn't recall if she ever did, or if it was simply the only lifeline after the system cut her loose with nothing. I'm good at my job, she replied instead. It's not the same, I know, but it counts for something. Adrian nodded as if her response was critical. And what would you be doing if anything was possible? The question came out of left field. No one asked her things like that. They asked about her shift, the dark circles under her eyes, about what went wrong today. You don't talk dreams with someone in survival mode. I don't know, she conceded. Then, as the strange privacy of the warm car pried something loose, she added, I used to think about teaching. Little kids, maybe. I used to like children. She stopped herself. Before what? Before the system proved that caring was a liability. Before Ethan proved that wanting anything just gives someone a weapon to use against you. Before you realized it was impractical, Adrian supplied for her, his voice completely neutral. Something like that. For a few blocks, they were silent. Lena watched the city's other side drift by. Bodegas, diners, figures on corners, all just waiting. New York after midnight was a totally different creature. Raw, more desperate, and brutally honest about its needs. Marcus steered the car onto a quiet block, stopping at a diner Lena had never noticed before. A blue and white neon sign buzzed. Athena's. Inside, a few solitary figures were scattered in booths. The night shift, the insomniacs, the lost with nowhere else to be. 20 minutes, Adrian said, echoing her words from the platform. Food, warmth. Then I will take you where you have to go. Lena only nodded, not trusting herself to speak, not trusting that the truth wouldn't escape. The truth that sounded like, please don't take me back there. Or, I don't know how much longer I can do this. Or just, I am so unbelievably tired of faking it. Marcus opened her door. Cold air flooded in, but it barely registered now. Adrian exited first, then turned and offered his hand. For a long, silent beat, she just looked at it. His hands were a paradox. Perfectly manicured nails, but with calluses suggesting work his expensive suit was meant to conceal, and a thin white scar over his knuckles like a paid debt. She took his hand. The grip was firm and sure, guiding her without any hint of pity. The moment her feet hit the sidewalk, he released her. The diner's heat enveloped them as they stepped through the door. A waitress with weary eyes and streaks of gray glanced up from the counter. She registered Adrian's expensive coat and Lena's worn-out scrubs, then pointed them to a booth in the back. Coffee was her only question as they slid in. Water, to start, Adrian replied before Lena could form a word. Then coffee if she decides to, and 2 plates of your biggest dinner, not the breakfast menu. The waitress, whose name tag read Deb, arched an eyebrow but stayed silent. Meatloaf is decent, comes with mashed potatoes and beans. Adrian looked at Lena, who gave a tiny nod, too fried to make a choice. 2 meatloafs it is, Adrian confirmed, and please keep the water coming. After the waitress left, Lena stared at the tabletop's faded pattern, a surface holding a million stories. She saw her own hands beside his phone. Hers were bruised and taped up from a fumbled needle stick yesterday. His hands were flawless, radiating control. You don't have to do this, she mumbled. Do what? This whole hero complex thing? I'm okay. So we've upgraded from I'm fine to a full sentence. That's an improvement. The gentle jab landed, and she almost smiled. The feeling was alien, emotion she had practically forgotten. Deb came back with 2 glasses of ice water and a coffee. Lena downed half the water in one desperate swallow. Her stomach seized up, but the cold shock was a godsend. She hadn't realized how thirsty she truly was. Slow down, Adrian advised, less an order than a warning. You'll make yourself sick, she shot back. A doctor's opinion from a random guy. He replied, common sense from seeing people on empty try to binge fuel. And boom, Lena slammed the glass down and locked eyes with him. And how have you witnessed that so much? You just scoop up fainting nurses off subway floors? Nope. Adrian kicked back, a wave of calm hitting him. But I've been in spots where I had to bet my life on someone with zero intel. It taught me how to read people, fast. So what's your read on me? The question was pure defense, a reflex she couldn't stop. He didn't even blink. I see someone who's survived on crumbs for so long, he said, his voice low, that a real feast looks like a trap. Someone who acts like they owe the world an apology for breathing, who's forgotten that it's not a crime to want things. A lump formed in her throat. She looked anywhere but at his sharp gray eyes. You have no idea who I am. No, Adrienne conceded. I don't. But I saw what went down on that platform. And I know for a fact those marks on your arms aren't from some clumsy fall. A tense, heavy silence dropped between them. Her own pulse was a drum in her ears. This was her cue to lie, to invent some excuse. But being so tired of all the deception was a whole other kind of torture. It's not your problem, was all she said. You're right. It's not. Just then, Deb returned with 2 plates of actual dinner. The smell of meatloaf and potatoes was like a ghost from another world. The waitress dropped the plates and then ghosted. Lena could only stare at the meal. When was the last time she got something without a secret cost? When had she last eaten something that wasn't from a machine? Eat, Adrian prompted, his tone gentle. He grabbed his own fork, letting the topic of her bruises just die. So, she ate. The first taste of potato was so unbelievably good it almost broke her. The second brought her back to reality. By the third, her body finally believed this kindness wasn't a trick. For once, she let herself just have something good. Adrienne ate more slowly, watching her without being obvious. For several minutes, they sat in complete silence, surrounded by the diner's low hum and the sound of their forks. Lena made it through half her meal before her system gave out. She set her fork down, sipping her water this time. Feeling better? Adrienne asked. She was. The black spots in her vision were gone. Her hands weren't shaking. For the first time in 16 hours, she wasn't about to hit the floor. Thank you. Don't mention it. I should probably get going. Lena peeked at her phone. 12:47 a.m. 13 furious texts from Ethan, each one uglier than the one before. The good feeling was instantly gone. I gotta go home. Adrian's gaze followed hers, catching the sudden shift. Is home really where you want to be right now? He asked. Want's got nothing to do with it. That's a dodge, not an answer. Lena really sized him up then, the pricey suit that couldn't hide his rough edges, the eyes that had clearly seen some things. Who are you? She finally demanded. For real, you're not just some random guy who showed up at the perfect moment. Adrian paused. The name's Adrian Valente, he stated. I run a private security firm. We handle heavy-duty threats for clients who can't call the cops. Security, Lena echoed. The answer was somehow both more and less than she expected. Bodyguards, for example. And you're telling me this because you asked, and I don't feed lies to people I plan on helping. You plan on helping me. I do. Why? Because you need it, and because I can, and because... He hesitated, something changing in his eyes. Because a long time ago, somebody helped me when they had every reason to walk away. I've been paying back that debt ever since. Lena's phone buzzed again. She couldn't look. Seeing Ethan's name would bring back the nightmare waiting for her. and remembering that would kill the tiny bit of nerve she was building up. "If I don't go back," she whispered, "he'll just be worse. Tomorrow will be a disaster." "Will it?" Adrienne's question was quiet but sharp as a knife. "Or will it just be different?" "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means you might be at the bottom already. You're just more scared of what you don't know. Because from my point of view, it doesn't get much worse than covering up bruises and collapsing on a train platform because you're too terrified to eat in your own home." Lena opened her mouth to argue, to say it was way more complicated than that. But the words got stuck because he was 100% right. It was already that terrible. It had been for months. All her reasons were just her picking a familiar kind of hell over a future she couldn't even imagine. "I have nowhere else to go," she whispered, and saying it out loud cost her everything. Adrian pulled out his phone, fired off a text, and got a reply in a second. "I have a private apartment in Tribeca. It's empty. Kitchen, clean sheets, and a security system that's almost impossible to crack." He looked up, totally serious. "You can have it tonight, tomorrow too. If you want, we can work out what's next. But no matter what you choose, you are not going back to the place that gave you those bruises. Not tonight." Lena's heart was hammering. This was nuts. She had zero clue if this man was her savior or just a richer, more stylish kidnapper. But she knew exactly what was waiting for her back in Washington Heights. She knew Ethan would be there, wasted and hunting for someone to blame for his own messed up life. She knew how to say no, but what came out was a quiet surrender. "Okay," Lena heard herself say. "Okay, just for the night." A single nod from Adrienne, and the deal was done. He dropped a fat stack of cash for the bill, then got up. Lena followed, the food giving her just enough strength. A slight shake still ran through her as she grabbed her things. Adrienne held the door, and she took a huge breath before walking out into the unknown. The car was waiting, Marcus at the wheel, as if late-night extractions were just business as usual. In Adrienne's world, they probably were. "Tribeca apartment," Adrienne said as they slid in. "The secure one." "Got it." The 20-minute trip was dead silent as they left the city's grit for its glamour. Lena just stared out the window, her phone a lead weight in her pocket. She finally turned off the notifications on her phone. Whatever fit Ethan was throwing, she wasn't going to be his audience. Not tonight. Maybe not ever again. They arrived at a building that just screamed money. A quiet entrance, a doorman who nodded at Adrian like he owned the joint, and a lobby that looked like a rich person's magazine spread. "Mr. Valente just tells the front desk. Miss Carter is staying in 12B. Give her the VIP treatment." The doorman, James, was completely unfazed. "Of course, Mr. Valente. Welcome, Miss Carter." The elevator was a slick cage of glass and steel, moving with a silent, terrifying precision. It shot up without making a sound as Lena's stomach did flips, and it wasn't because of the altitude. 12th floor. The doors slid open onto a hallway so perfectly styled it felt like a power move. We're talking subtle colors, actual art and lighting that was more for looking good than for seeing. Adrienne walked her to the second door on the left and swiped a card. A soft beep, a solid click. The door swung open to a space that made her own apartment feel like a shoebox. Open plan, a kitchen with acres of counter space, and a living room with designer furniture that actually looked usable. Huge windows showed off a city view that cost more per square foot than most people make in a year. "Bedrooms are that way," Adrienne gestured. "Private bathrooms, new towels, and a fully stocked kitchen. Help yourself." I can have some clothes delivered tomorrow if you need. Lena just stood there, totally stunned by the sheer luxury, feeling like a stray that had wandered into a palace. "This is insane," she mumbled. He just said a safe place to land isn't insane. It's a basic need. "There's no way I can afford this," he shot back. "No one is sending a bill." "Then what's the angle?" The question was sharp. That much kindness always had a hidden price. Adrienne just stared at her for a second, then grabbed a card and scribbled something on it. "That's my direct line. Call me 24/7 for food, clothes, backup with the psycho you're ditching, anything." He paused. "What I want is for you to be safe. That's it. No strings, no I owe us. Just get some rest without sleeping with one eye open." As he moved to leave, she panicked. "Wait!" she called out. What if he... She couldn't even get the words out. Adrienne finished for her. "What if he finds you? He won't. This building's security is a fortress. But for your peace of mind, there's a panic button beside the bed. It dials my cell and building security at the same time. Press it, and someone will be at your door in under 2 minutes." It dawned on her. "You've done this before." He nodded. "Why?" A shadow passed over his face, a mix of old pain and regret. "Because I know how it feels to have no options, and I know what it's like when someone decides to give you one." Before she could say another word, he was gone, the door shutting with a soft, final click. Lena stood alone in the totally silent apartment, her head reeling. An hour ago, she'd been passed out on a subway platform, and now she was in a stranger's penthouse safe house. It felt like a bizarre dream. Her phone vibrated one last time. 22 messages. She took it out, saw Ethan's name, and felt something inside her just break. She didn't just mute it, she powered the entire thing off. Held that button down until the screen went dark, until his digital presence was erased, until the invisible chain he held on her finally snapped. So Lena hits the window, gazes down at Manhattan like it's taunting her. Out there, her psycho ex Ethan is probably trashing their place, already plotting his revenge for when she comes crawling back. Plot twist, she's never going back. Not tonight, not ever. She leans on the cold glass and finally breaks the first tears in 8 long months. And this wasn't some tiny sniffle. We're talking full-on, body-rattling sobs, flushing out all the terror. She's just praying this rescue is for real, that happy endings aren't just for stories, and that sometimes guys with intense eyes mean business. Lena wakes up to weird sunlight, not the sad gray crap from her old place. This is pure gold, flooding through huge windows like an apology from the city. For 3 seconds, she's completely lost. Then last night's drama hits her like a freight train, the subway platform, Adrienne snatching her, the diner, the choice to just not go home. Her phone on the nightstand is a dead black brick. She stares at it like a bomb. In the daylight, the room is insane, with sheets that cost more than her whole paycheck. All the furniture is from those bougie stores with 0 price tags, the kind where if you ask, you're too poor to be there. The living room is the same vibe, but the morning sun makes all the fancy stuff feel like it's judging her. What the hell did she just do? Lena sits up, and every single ache fires up. She's not dead on her feet anymore, but the damage is still there. Bruised ribs scream when she breathes. The mark on her cheek from Ethan's ring is a constant reminder. Her muscles ache from 16-hour shifts and pure stress. The clock reads 9:47 a.m. She slept for almost 9 hours. She literally can't remember the last time that happened. Her backpack sits on a chair holding her entire life. Nasty scrubs, 3 granola bars, a book, and a wallet with no cash and an ID for a home that isn't hers anymore. Everything she has is in that one bag. It should be depressing, but honestly, it feels like freedom. There's nothing tying her down, nothing she can't just ditch. But she already did, didn't she? The second she chose Adrienne's car, that was it. Her stomach growls, yanking her out of her own head. Right. Food. Adrienne said the kitchen was loaded. She walks out in his huge t-shirt smelling like crazy expensive cologne and checks the fridge. Yeah, loaded was the understatement of the year. We're talking fresh produce, actual eggs, milk that isn't about to turn, and real blocks of cheese. The freezer has good meat and gourmet-looking ice cream. Lena just stares, feeling something inside her crack. When did a fridge last give her options? When was breakfast not a game of what she could barely scrape together? She makes scrambled eggs with cheese, toast with actual butter, and drinks orange juice that tasted like it was squeezed from an orange. Sitting in a total stranger's apartment, in his clothes, eating his food, she feels like the world's biggest fraud. The business card he left is on the counter. Heavy stock, Valente Security Solutions. On the back, in perfect handwriting, is his private cell number. Lena picks it up. She knows she has to call to thank him for saving her ass last night. For all this, she had no plan B. Her entire strategy was to never see Ethan again, which was more of a prayer than a plan. Before she chickens out, she turns on the phone. The screen explodes in a digital assault. Texts, missed calls. The numbers just keep climbing. 37 texts, 15 missed calls, 8 voicemails, every last one from him. Lena's hands are shaking as she opens the messages. Every instinct is screaming at her not to, but she has to see the insanity she escaped. The first few texts look almost sane. Where are you? Your shift ended at 11:30. Pick up. Then the poison starts to drip. Accusations, orders to get home immediately. He threatened what he would do when she came back. By 2 a.m., he'd flipped to fake apologies. He was sorry, just worried, a move she knew way too well. By 4 a.m., the threats were back and much, much darker. He was positive she was with another guy. She was going to pay. The final text, sent at 7:23 this morning, was a promise. I know you'll be back. You always do. Because you have nowhere else to go. Lena drops the phone, not even touching the voicemails. Her appetite is gone. The food in her stomach feels like lead. He was right, wasn't he? There was nowhere else. This apartment, Adrienne's help, it was all temporary. The real world was coming for her soon. She had no money, no family, and all her friends were long gone, pushed away to keep Ethan happy. Her phone rings. It's not him. It's a number she doesn't know. She almost declines, but something makes her answer. Miss Carter. A man's voice, professional, a complete stranger. Yes. This is James from the front desk. Sorry to disturb you, but a guy named Ethan Morris is down here demanding to see you. He's dead set that you're staying in this building. Lena's blood turns to ice. What? He has no access, of course, and I've already told him I can't confirm a thing, but he is refusing to budge. So, I wanted to warn you before we involved the police. What? Lena's voice was a choked sound. How did he find this building? Couldn't tell you, ma'am. Would you like me to have him removed? Yes, immediately. Her brain was glitching out. Don't confirm anything. Just say he has the wrong address. Consider it done. I'll be discreet. Then, a click. Lena was frozen at the kitchen counter, sheer terror choking her. How did he know? She told absolutely no one. She didn't even know this address. Did he follow her? Stake out the station, bug her damn phone? The phone, you idiot! The Life 360 app he made her install 6 months back, all for her safety. She'd completely forgotten about it, the digital collar he used to track her every move. With trembling hands, Lena located the spyware and nuked it. She then ripped through her settings, revoking permissions, deleting anything that could ping her location. That should have been the first move, the very first thing she did last night. But she was so exhausted, so desperate for one single night of quiet, she failed to erase her digital footprint. A knock on the door made her leap, nearly knocking her off the stool. "Miss Carter, it's James from the lobby. I have a delivery." Lena tiptoed to the door like it was booby-trapped, peeking through the peephole. It was the doorman by himself holding a box. She opened the door a crack, keeping the chain locked. "Sorry to bother you again," James said. His face was a professional mask, but his eyes were sympathetic. "Mr. Morris has been escorted away. We have his photo now. He is officially blacklisted. Also, Mr. Valente called. He is on his way." "He called you?" "The distress button in this suite alerts multiple contacts. When I informed Mr. Valente, he said he would handle it personally." James offered her the package. "He also instructed me to bring this up. Said you'd probably be needing it." Lena took the box, which was heavier than it looked, and muttered thanks. James just nodded and left. She slammed the door, shot all 3 bolts, and leaned against it, trying to breathe. Inside the box was a brand new phone, a high-end model still in the plastic. A note in Adrian's handwriting was on top. "Untraceable. New number. Your old phone is cooked." How did he know? How was he moving so fast? Another knock. Lena checked the peephole. It was Adrian in casual clothes. He wore dark jeans, a black sweater, and a leather jacket that was probably worth more than her car. Still rich, just not screaming it. She opened the door. Adrian's eyes immediately zoned in on her face, scanning for any damage. "You okay? How did you know about Ethan and about this phone?" "James called me when some guy showed up asking for you. Given what happened last night, I made a solid guess. He walked in, and Lena saw he moved like a guy who always scans a room for threats." "May I?" She just nodded, clutching the new phone. Adrienne went to the windows, looking down at the street. "He's gone. Security walked him 2 blocks and made it clear a return visit gets him arrested. We also filed a formal harassment complaint with the NYPD." "You can't do that. It'll just make him crazier. You have no clue what he's capable of." "You're right, I don't," Adrian shot back, turning to face her. "But I know his type. I know these guys get high on their victims feeling trapped. The second you stop acting helpless, the game changes." "You don't get it. He'll find a way. He always does." "Not here." Adrian's tone was ice, no room to argue. "This building has security that most people don't even know exists. Facial recognition linked to a blacklist, biometric access, 24-hour surveillance. He is physically blocked from ever getting to you in here." Lena wanted to believe him. She desperately wanted to trust that tech could protect her. But 8 months with Ethan proved that walls were just a challenge to a guy like him, that locks were nothing against his sheer obsession. "He knows I'm here," she whispered. "He tracked my phone. He will wait. He'll watch. He'll grab me the moment I have to leave. So don't leave. Not yet." Adrian walked to the kitchen and began making coffee like he owned the place. For all she knew, he did. "Take a few days. Let me deal with him." "Deal with him how?" Legally, restraining order, harassment charges. I have lawyers on retainer who live for this kind of fight. They are the best in the city. I can't pay for a lawyer. Adrian poured 2 coffees, putting cream in both without asking, somehow just knowing. I'm not asking you to pay. You can't just... Lena was at a complete loss for words. Why are you doing all this? You don't know me at all. You were someone who was in trouble. So Adrian slides her a mug, like, this is all that matters. They're just standing in the silent kitchen sipping coffee as the city wakes up 12 floors below. Lena's mind is a total disaster zone, playing out every single way this could spectacularly backfire. Adrian is just chilling with the quiet, not pushing, just existing. Finally, she drops the one question that's eating her up inside. What's your story? You said someone had your back once. Spill it. Adrienne goes dead silent for so long she thinks he's gonna blow her off. When I was 17, I ran with a crew that wasn't exactly paying taxes. I thought I was untouchable, a real player, that the world was just predators and prey. He just stares into his coffee. Then I screwed up big time. Should have ended up in a ditch, but someone stepped in, pulled me out, gave me a choice about what kind of man I was going to be. So what did you choose? To be the guy who steps in. He looked straight at her. I built this entire operation on that one principle. We shield people who can't go to the cops. Sometimes it's a CEO with a psycho stalker, other times a witness who needs to vanish. He motions around the apartment. And sometimes it's a nurse who faints on a subway platform because she's too terrified to go home. I'm not your responsibility. Correct, Adrienne says. You're your own, I'm just supplying the gear. Her old phone vibrates on the counter, another text from Ethan. She ignores it. I have to work, she says. My shift starts at 3. Call out. I can't afford to. Yeah, you can. You can afford one day to strategize without wondering if he's lurking outside the ER. And he was right. Lena knew he was dead on. But a sick day meant 0 pay, and she was already drowning, one emergency away from being totally broke. Adrienne basically read her mind. How much do you clear in a shift? That's not. Just play the game. After taxes, about $200. Got it. Adrian pulls out his wallet and peels off some cash. $400. He drops it on the counter. That's 2 shifts. Take today and tomorrow. Recover. I'll handle the legal assault. Monday, you walk into work with a restraining order locked in and security measures live. Lena just glares at the money. I can't take that. You already did. It's right there. This is nuts. People don't just throw cash around. I'm not people. I'm someone who can give you $400 and not even feel it. And you're someone who needs it so bad that pride is a luxury you can't afford. That brutal honesty just cut her down. Cut. He saw right through her act. She was desperate for this. The safety, the backup, the chance to drop a weight she'd been hauling alone. What if I just grab the money and disappear? She heard herself ask. A ghost of a smile hit Adrian's lips, and for a second, his hard expression softened into something almost warm. That's not in your programming, he said. And if it were, I'd call it $400 well spent on buying someone's freedom. Lena's fingers brushed the bills, folding them before putting them back. How could she trust this? How could she accept this without expecting a massive price tag? Oh well, Adrian finished his coffee and rinsed the mug. You don't have to figure it out. You just have to let it play out. He left after that, vowing to send legal updates. Alone, Lena tried to process the last 12 hours. Just yesterday, she was trapped in her own life with no way out. Now she was posted up in a Tribeca penthouse, drinking fancy coffee, with $400 on the counter and a stranger's promise of protection. It felt totally fake, like a dream she'd wake up from. But the coffee was real, the money was real, and the bruise on her ribs was absolutely real. And out there, Ethan's rage was probably demolishing their old life, a storm hunting for her. But not here. Never again. After 8 hellish months, she was finally inside a fortress he could never breach. She unboxed the new phone, starting the setup. A fresh number, a total reset, a shot at a life where she wasn't constantly diffusing his temper, where every word wasn't a landmine. The screen prompted for a new passcode. She hesitated, then typed in 6 digits. November 27th. The date she took a blind jump into a new reality. A buzz from the old phone. His name on the display. The choice was locked in. Sliding the window open, she looked down 12 floors to the street and she let the old phone drop. It tumbled end over end before shattering into a million pieces on the pavement. With a small smile, she slammed the window closed. 3 surreal days just evaporated. Adrian's updates were relentless. Order filed, threats documented. The cops had officially warned Ethan. And Lena was finally remembering how to breathe without being terrified. Day 4 rolls in, and it's time to get back to it. Marcus is her driver, a non-negotiable from Adrian. He drops her at the staff entrance at 2:45 p.m. Lena feels like an alien in her own life. "I'll be posted right here when you're off," Marcus says. "That's really not necessary." "My instructions were specific." She let it go. It was clear Adrian didn't make suggestions. He deployed strategies, making any protest useless. The ER was the typical organized bedlam. 3 stabbings, 2 overdoses, a dude with a mangled hand, and chaos erupting from Bay 6. Just another Tuesday. "Carter!" It was Linda, her supervisor, appearing beside her. "You made it. Everything cool?" "Yeah, thanks for the cover." "A little more than 2 hours heads up would be clutch next time." Linda's tone was all business, but not malicious. "We get hammered with last-minute call-outs." "I get it." "My bad. It won't happen again." Apologizing was way simpler than explaining the whole escaping a psycho ex situation. Better to be seen as a flake than a victim who finally got out. Her shift quickly turned into a familiar insane sprint, a constant rhythm of beeps, drips, and frantic charting, mixed with that soul-crushing exhaustion from managing pain. 5 hours in, she felt it. A cold stare, that creepy, crawly feeling on her skin. She glanced up, and he was there, in the waiting room. Ethan. The air just evacuated her lungs. No way, he could not be here. The court order explicitly forbids this. But there he was, 40 feet away, his glare promising absolute hell. Lena's hand started trembling, and her pen clattered to the floor. Jennifer, a younger nurse, noticed her staring. "Friend of yours? He's been lurking for an hour. Security almost 86'd him, but he claimed he was waiting for someone." "Get them," Lena whispered. "Now." Jennifer's expression immediately flipped to red alert. "Oh crap, is he?" She reached for the phone, but Lena was totally paralyzed, pinned by his psycho gaze like a trapped animal. She saw his face contort with fury when he realized she'd called in backup. He lunged toward the entrance, but security was faster. 2 huge guards cut him off. She couldn't hear the words, but the body language was clear. He switched from aggressive predator to wounded party. He even pulled out his phone, ready to record the whole performance. She watched them firmly escort him out. He shot one last look over his shoulder, locking eyes with her, and silently mouthed, "This isn't over." Then he was gone. She was still frozen when Linda showed up. "Are you all right?" "That guy. I have a protective order against him." "I see." Linda's face went ice cold. "My office now." The room was a tiny, paper-choked mess that smelled of stale coffee. Linda slammed a form on the desk. "This is procedure. We flag people with orders. Security gets his picture. If he returns, we call the cops. No questions asked." She pushed the paper toward her. "Fill this out. And Lena, you need to be safe. If this escalates, it's a major liability." "I'm safe," Lena insisted, though her trembling hands were calling her a liar. "I have a secure location. It's handled." "Is it really?" Linda was not sold. "Because this looks like it's just getting warmed up." And she knew Linda was right. The rest of her shift was a total blur of adrenaline and dread. Every sound made her flinch. At 11:30, Marcus appeared, and she just collapsed into the passenger seat. "Trouble?" he asked, watching her in the rear view. "He found me. At work." Marcus instantly pulled out his phone and shot off a text. 30 seconds later, her phone buzzed. A message from Adrian. "Get her home. I am handling this now." What did that even mean? She was too fried to care and just drifted off. Adrian was already there at the apartment. He glanced up from his laptop, reading her whole story on her face before snapping it shut. "Tell me everything." And she did. The whole nightmare came pouring out. The psycho stare, the guards, and the terrifying certainty that Ethan was just getting started. After she was done, he was quiet for a long moment. "This will be finished by tomorrow." "You can't guarantee that." "Watch me." He grabbed his phone and made a call. "Leo, I need a full dossier on an Ethan Morris. Everything. Criminal, financial, work history, personal life, every single secret. I want it by sunrise." "I know the time. Just charge the account." He hung up, his focus back on her. Guys like him operate in the shadows. They use their victims' fear as a shield. But fear is only a weapon if you've got no other moves. "So what's the play?" "To give you all the moves?" He opened his laptop again, his fingers flying. "By sunrise, this creep's entire life is gonna be laid bare on this screen. Then we're gonna teach him that messing with you has a price he can't even fathom." Part of her should have been freaked out by his cold-blooded skill, by this digital takedown. This was a dark world, and he was clearly a king. But all she felt was a massive wave of relief, an ally, someone with real muscle, and the stone-cold vibe of a man who stared into the abyss. "I need to pay you," she began, "for the apartment, the legal team." "No." Adrian shut her down, his eyes glued to the screen. "Nope." He finally glanced up. "I meant what I said. 0 cost, no fine print attached. This is all part of the service." "That doesn't really explain why." He snapped the laptop shut and leaned back. "The truth? My client roster is packed with the rich and famous. But this entire firm was built on remembering being 17 and completely helpless. Hov. So once a month, I handle a case for someone who can't afford it. You're this month's pro bono. So I'm just your charity project. You're a person who has the right to feel safe. The file is a formality. The job is just being a decent human being." She finally collapsed onto a chair. "And if I still want to pay you back later..." Then give it to a women's shelter. Or you can help the next person who's in your shoes. Pay it forward, never pay it back. That line was his entire operating system. Lena watched him, trying to figure out what drives a guy to be a permanent shield for the innocent against the wolves. "Who did that for you?" she asked him straight up. "When you were 17, who was your hero?" A dark cloud passed over Adrian's face. "Her name was Marie. She ran a youth center in the Bronx. I stumbled in one night, bleeding, and she never asked a single question. Just stitched me up and told me I was worth more than an early grave." He went quiet for a second. "She died 6 years ago. Cancer. I never really got the chance to thank her the right way." "So that's why you do this?" "It's one of the reasons." Adrian got up and walked to the window. "The rest is selfish. Helping people gives me a reason to exist. It makes the hell I survived as a kid count for something." Lena went and stood beside him. Far below, the city was alive with millions of secret battles. She wondered how many other people were out there, hiding in strange places, saved by strangers, just praying to see another day. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to be doing any of this." "I have to," she shot back. "You rescued me, maybe not from a bullet, but from a life that was already dead and buried." Their eyes locked. "So, thank you." Adrian just gave a small nod. A silent agreement passed between them. Two survivors who totally get it. "Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow's gonna be a war." Then he was gone. Lena was alone again in the quiet luxury bunker, holding on to a sliver of hope. She showered, changed into the clean clothes Adrian provided, simple, classy, a perfect fit, and passed out in bed. Sleep hit her like a train. For the first night in 8 months, she wasn't trapped in nightmares about locked doors, fists, or the sound of Ethan's voice. Instead, she dreamt of falling at a subway stop and a hand grabbing her just in time. The walk up to the courthouse felt like her own execution. Lena's heels echoed on marble floors that had witnessed thousands of lives get shattered and pieced back together. The justice system was both her last hope and a spectacular failure. It had been 3 months since Adrian's people filed the order. 3 months since the district attorney finally acted on the medical reports she'd finally found the guts to get. 90 days of hearings, endless paperwork, and legal babble that felt like trying to breathe underwater. Her safety had felt like a temporary lease the whole time. "We don't have to do this today," Adrian said, right by her side. He had nuked his entire calendar, put his world on pause, and just showed up at her door. 7 a.m., and Adrian is offering a parachute like, "Yo, we can delay this thing." But Lena's already in her battle armor, a slick navy blazer he got her. She looks in the mirror and sees a complete stranger ready for a fight. She's not having it. "Delaying just gives the panic more time to marinate," she tells him. He's obviously worried sick, but she meets his look with pure ice. The guy has been super respectful, giving her all the space she needs to patch herself up, and his place has basically become her stronghold. Her clothes are there, her books are there, she's pretty much colonized the apartment. But what happens when the dust settles? That's the one landmine they're both avoiding. Nobody is touching that grenade of a conversation. You don't map out the future when you're still navigating a minefield. "I have to do this," she says. "Not for the suits, but for me. I need to look at him and feel absolutely zero." Adrian just nods. He understands. The guy's hauling his own baggage from a past that ambushes him on sleepless nights. They've got a silent contract. It's her and the dude who caught her mid-nosedive, 2 survivors trying to unload their burdens before they get crushed. The courtroom, a major disappointment, looks like a sad school auditorium. not some Hollywood drama set. And then she sees him, Ethan, at the defendant's table. He's sitting beside his public defender, who looks completely burnt out. Prison has carved him down, given him a buzz cut, and that blazing orange jumpsuit makes his pale skin look even more sickly. The instant Lena walks in, his head snaps toward her. Their eyes connect across 20 feet of pure voltage, but she holds his stare, refusing to break. Round 1 to Lena. She's seizing back the power he bled from her for 8 long months. The prosecutor, Patricia Reeves, motions Lena to a front row seat. Adrian sits right next to her, a solid brick wall of backup, promising he's got her covered. It's a guarantee that if she stumbles, he's the safety net. The judge enters, everyone rises, and the cold procedural gears begin to grind. Lena's just fighting to stop shaking. The prosecution calls Lena Marie Carter. Just getting to her feet is a massive power play. That long walk to the witness stand feels like a lifetime squeezed into 20 seconds. Every single eye on her, with Ethan's psycho stare trying to drill a hole right through her back. The bailiff does the whole oath routine. Lena places her hand on some book and swears to tell the truth. The whole truth. As if it's ever that clean. As if you can just sanitize the terror and shame that almost erased a person from existence. Patricia Reeves approaches, clutching files she doesn't even need. Lena gets that it's all a show to sell her nightmare to 12 strangers. Miss Carter, tell the court how you met the defendant. Lena's mouth is bone dry. She chugs water, buying 5 seconds to remember how to breathe. A bar in Queens 2 years ago. I was with work colleagues. He offered me a drink. And you began dating? Yeah, we were together for about 14 months before I moved in with him. When did the violence begin? Lena had this answer locked and loaded. She'd replayed it a million times. But saying it here, with Ethan 10 feet away and a jury watching, the words feel hollow. It started about 3 months after I moved in. Small stuff. He'd get furious if I was late from my shift. Accusations. Checking my texts. His questions were like a nonstop interrogation. She takes a breath. Then one night, I corrected something he told his friends. After they left, he struck me for the first time. Describe that for the court. This was the part she dreaded. Having to medically describe the savagery to strangers who could never grasp the sheer horror of it all. In the stomach, he said I humiliated him, that I needed to learn when to keep my mouth shut. Her voice is a flat line, drained of all emotion. It's a rehearsed calm to make her sound believable, not unhinged. After that, it was for anything. For being late, for a bad dinner, for looking at someone funny, for just existing when he needed to hit something. Did you ever ask for help? That's the knockout question. Lena describes 2 trips to the ER, using the same tired excuses about falling or walking into a door. She catches Patricia's gaze. I'm a nurse, she adds. I see this kind of thing constantly. But knowing what to do and actually doing it while you're trapped in the storm are 2 different worlds. Patricia nods slowly. Let's discuss the night of August 17th. That date is basically a scar tissue on her memory. Lena sips water, letting the toxic memories she's suppressed for 3 months flood back. A 16-hour double shift. She was exhausted, starving, and bracing for a battle because she'd had to take overtime. Her eyes flick to the jury. 7 women, 5 men. Their expressions a mix of sympathy and doubt. She tells them she stopped to get his favorite beer, hoping it would smooth things out. Spoiler alert, it didn't. He was already hammered, paranoid she was cheating with someone at the hospital. When she tried to argue, he snatched her by the throat and slammed her into the wall. You could hear someone in the gallery gasp. Lena just stared straight ahead, clinging to her composure by a thread. He held her there until her vision went fuzzy, then let her collapse to the floor. While she was down, he kicked her twice in the ribs, hissing that if she ever showed him up again, he would end her. Her voice remained steady, like a doctor reading a patient's chart. I believed him. After that, it was a strategic retreat. She waited until he passed out, threw stuff in one bag, and ran. She pulled another 16-hour shift, and one more after that. Her life became a masterclass in avoidance, sneaking home for clean clothes only when she knew he was gone. She slept at the hospital, in her car, or just rode the subway all night because moving felt safer than staying put, as if escaping is just a simple decision. Because I had nowhere to go, she says flatly. The apartment, her career, her bank account, it was all tangled up with him. Her entire life was a cage that he had built around her. Her voice cracks just a little. And because he swore he'd find me, promised to hurt me in ways I couldn't even dream up. And she absolutely believed him. Patricia lets that bomb drop, making the jury feel what it's like to be completely cornered. Miss Carter, when did you finally get your chance to bolt? The night I passed out on the subway. Lena breaks down the whole nightmare, the killer shifts, the constant hunger, the terror. She tells them about collapsing and how a complete stranger caught her, a guy who saw right through her BS excuses. He gave her a meal and a safe place to crash for the first time in forever. She never glances at Adrian, but you can feel his stare burning a hole in her. So after that, did this guy try to contact you? Yes, she confirms. Her phone got blown up with calls and texts. He ambushed her at work, trying to scare her coworkers. When the restraining order hit, he sent threats through their mutual friends, swearing she'd pay for embarrassing him. Then Patricia whips out a phone. Miss Carter, is this your phone? It is. And are these messages from the defendant? Lena stares at the screen. Ethan's psycho rants, now just basic black and white text, look way less terrifying than when they'd pop up at 2 a.m. Yes? Would you please read message number 14 to the court? Lena's throat seizes up. She knows exactly which one that is. The message that made the district attorney go all in. You worthless whore. You think you can just dip? Hide behind some pretty boy and a piece of paper? I'll track you down. I'm gonna wreck you worse than you can imagine. Then the whole world will know you're a lying tramp. The threat landed like a grenade in the silent courtroom. Lena watched the jury squirm, the judge's expression go rigid. Even Ethan's own lawyer looked like he'd just been sucker punched. Thank you, Miss Carter. We are finished here. The defense lawyer gets up. She looks like a total rookie, stuck with a dumpster fire case she's forced to defend. Lena almost feels sorry for her. Miss Carter, you're a nurse, right? Yeah. And you're trained to recognize the signals of domestic abuse. I am. So you knew the system. You knew where to find help. You knew you could call the police. It wasn't really a question, but Lena answers it anyway. Knowing a lifeboat exists and being able to reach it when you're actively drowning are two totally different things. But you did, in the end, accept help from Mr. Valente. The lawyer shoots a look at Adrian. A rich guy who set you up with a home, lawyers, and money. Isn't it true you just saw a chance to trade up and took it? Patricia jumps to her feet. Objection. Counsel is blaming the victim for being rescued. Sustained. Move on, counselor. The attorney pivots. Miss Carter, you were with my client for 8 months after this alleged abuse began. You had chances to leave. You decided not to. Couldn't these have been mutual arguments, fights where you both got physical? Lena's hands ball into fists in her lap. This was the exact story she knew they would sell. The narrative that she was part of it, that his insane fury was just a normal couple's fight. No, she states, her voice like ice. I never laid a hand on him. I never threatened him. He had zero reason to ever be scared of me. This was not a two-way street. It was him hurting me simply because he could. But you have no witnesses for any of this. No police reports from that time. It's just your word against his. I have emergency room records from 2 separate visits. I have photos of the bruises. I have texts where he literally threatened my life. And I have... Lena takes a deep breath. I have the fact that I'm sitting right here on the record with my face and name public, knowing this will follow me for the rest of my life. Nobody does this for 5 minutes of clout. They do it because it was real, and they are done staying silent. The defense lawyer searches for an objection but comes up empty. She sits back down. The judge declares a recess. Lena gets down from the stand, her legs feeling like overcooked spaghetti. Adrian is right there, and this time she grabs his hand, leaning on him before the next round starts. You were amazing, he whispers. I think I'm going to be sick. 100% normal. Come on, let's get some air. They find a hidden bench far from the courthouse madness, where side deals were getting made in hushed tones. Lena hangs her head, breathing through the nausea of having just broadcast her trauma to the world. Adrian doesn't give her some cheesy pep talk. He just sits there, his hand on her back, a solid weight that says, I got your back. Do you think they believed me? Lena finally asks. I think you told them your truth, he says. That's all you can ever do. It just feels like it's not enough. It usually does, but it's more than he ever gave you. Lena slowly sits up straight. Down the hall, she sees Ethan being led back inside, in cuffs, wearing the same psycho rage face that used to paralyze her. Now it just makes her feel drained. What happens if they let him walk? She wonders aloud. Then we make damn sure you stay safe. Period. That restraining order is rock solid. The security team stays with you. You will never have to see him alone again. And if he's found guilty, then he serves his time and you get to start figuring out what your life looks like without him in it. That second possibility sounded like a fantasy, a world where the system actually works and people believe victims. Then again, 3 months ago, just feeling safe seemed like a fantasy. So did eating a meal without being scared, or sleeping a full night. All that impossible stuff had slowly turned into her reality, built one day at a time. They were called back inside. The closing arguments were just static. Patricia delivered a killer closing statement about the evidence, which the defense made a weak attempt to dismantle. The jury went out to deliberate. The judge announced court would return for the verdict. The wait was 4 hours of pure agony. Lena passed them in a side room with Patricia, Adrian, and 2 of his security guys. Sandwiches arrived that no one touched, and coffee grew cold. Lena tried to read, to scroll through her phone, anything to keep her mind from picturing Ethan walking free, ambushing her at her job, at her apartment, just showing up again with the same rage, but now leveled up by months of stewing. A knock from the bailiff signaled the jury was back, and Lena's heart launched into her throat. The courtroom felt colder now, or maybe that was just her. She took her seat in the front row and watched 12 people file back in, their faces giving away nothing at all. The foreman gets up, a middle-aged man with glasses who looked like an accountant. He was holding a piece of paper that contained Lena's entire future, folded into a single word. On the charge of second-degree assault, what is your verdict? Guilty. The air rushed out of Lena's lungs. On aggravated harassment, guilty. On the charge of stalking, what is your verdict? Guilty. 3 for 3. 3 official declarations that her nightmare was real, that it mattered, that Ethan's abuse wasn't some two-sided drama or a story she invented. Behind her, someone was crying softly. Beside her, Adrian's hand found hers and squeezed. It was solid and warm, an anchor in the here and now. Lena's gaze locked on Ethan. He stared forward like he couldn't care less, but she saw the pulse beating in his jaw. It was the exact same tell that always warned her a storm was about to hit. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks away. A bailiff escorted Ethan out. His lawyer packed her bag like she knew this was a losing battle from the start. Patricia turned to Lena, saying, "You did it. This is what justice looks like." Justice felt like bone-deep exhaustion, a massive wave of relief, and a strange, hollow place where the fear used to be. Lena could only manage a nod, unable to speak. As she walked out of the courthouse, the sun on her skin felt like a blessing. It was spring in New York, a day the city was showing off. Adrian had Marcus pull the car around, but Lena paused at the curb. "Can we just walk?" she asked. He studied her face for a moment. "Are you sure?" "I have to be moving. I need to feel my own feet picking a direction, not being herded around by court schedules." "All right, where are we going?" Lena glanced down the bustling street at the city spread out before her. 3 months earlier, her entire existence fit into a backpack, running on pure terror. Now she had an apartment that was starting to feel like home, her old job back now that the threat of Ethan ambushing her was gone, and a guy who caught her when she fell and only wanted to see her get back on her feet. "Nowhere in particular," she said, "just away." And with that, they began to walk. Adrian walked in sync with her, letting her choose the pace and the route without a word. They passed by food carts and vibrant flower stands. They navigated through crowds of office drones on lunch breaks and confused tourists squinting at maps. Just ordinary people living ordinary lives, totally unaware that a woman's entire universe had just been set right a few blocks away. "I'm still waiting for this to feel real," Lena finally said over the city's noise. "What's this?" "Winning, justice, all of it. I figured after the verdict I would feel, I don't know, free, victorious, something other than just numb." Adrian was quiet for a second. "Justice doesn't delete what happened. It just puts a final period on one chapter, so you're free to start the next one." That's surprisingly deep for a guy who runs a security company. Hey, I'm a man of many talents. Against all logic, Lena felt a genuine smile emerge. A quick flash of real humor, not a forced one. That was happening more now. Little pockets of time where she forgot to be terrified or sad and just was. Their path eventually led them to Battery Park, where they watched the choppy harbor, the endless stream of tourists, and the ferries on their routes. Lena claimed a bench and tried to picture what came next. Returning to an apartment that was meant to be a safe house but was turning into a home. Going back to work without that constant paranoid look over her shoulder. She's actually seeing a life that isn't just about survival, a future free from his psycho threats. Maybe now she can find out what she actually wants, not just what she's been forced to tolerate. "Thank you," she says, her voice quiet but strong as hell. Adrian just looks at her. "For what?" "For yanking me out of the fire, for never letting go, for making me feel worth it when I was totally checked out." "Nah, that was all you, Lena. I just gave you a safe house to do the work." "That's a hell of a lot more than anyone else gets." "That's 'cause the entire system that's supposed to protect people is a complete train wreck." A new kind of anger enters Adrian's voice, one not aimed at her. "You deserved backup. Back then and right now. Nobody should ever have to survive what you did." Lena risks it, leaning her head on his shoulder, just testing the waters. It's not weird, it's exactly what it is. Two people slammed together by a crisis, now figuring out if their wild alliance can turn into something real. "So, what's the next move?" she asks. "Sentencing is in 2 weeks. After that, the stay-away order is permanent. Ethan's looking at 3 years in the clink, maybe 5, depends on the judge." Adrian pauses. "And you get to build your life from the ground up now." "What if I don't have a clue how to do that?" "Then you go slow, day by day. There's no shot clock on this." They stay there until the sun dips over Jersey and the air gets a bite to it. Adrian calls Marcus. The car just materializes, stealthy as always. They drive back to Tribeca, bogged down in rush hour traffic that's crawling through the city's veins. The second Lena steps inside, the entire vibe of the apartment has flipped. Nothing physically changed. Same stuff, same view, same coffee machine she finally cracked. But something huge shifted inside. This place wasn't just some bolt hole anymore. It was hers, to either claim or walk away from. A choice, not a cage. Adrian hangs back by the door. "I should probably bounce. Give you some air." "Stay," Lena blurts out. And because that word landed like a ton of bricks, she adds, I really can't be alone tonight. I can't just sit in the quiet, replaying the trial, stressing on the next move, and wondering if I was actually strong enough." "You were way more than strong enough." "Stay anyway." So he does. They crush some Thai takeout from the corner spot Lena's digging, eating right from boxes while some dumb cooking show plays on TV, a perfect distraction that required 0 brain cells. Adrian drops a wild story about a security job in Boston that went completely sideways. Lena fires back with a funny story about a regular patient at Sinai, an old lady who flirts with all the male doctors and is the hospital's gossip plug. It was just a normal, chill conversation, the kind that had nothing to do with trauma or rescues or their whole messed up hero and victim thing. Around 10 p.m., a tidal wave of pure exhaustion just wipes Lena out. The adrenaline from the trial completely vanished, leaving this massive, heavy void. "I need to crash," she says. "I'll get out of your hair." "You could stay." The words flew out before she could catch them. "The couch is fine, or the guest room is open. She fumbles, trying to find the right script. "I don't want to wake up by myself, not this time." Adrian's expression goes soft. He totally gets it. "Okay, guest room it is. I'll be right here if you need me." Lena just nods. She knows she should probably say more. Maybe call out how weird it is to ask a guy to crash when they haven't even had a first kiss. Their whole situation was stuck in this weird zone between gratitude and raw attraction, plus something else they hadn't defined. But she was too wrecked for a big speech, too gassed for a deep talk. She went to her room and passed out instantly. a deep, dreamless sleep that only comes when you finally drop a weight you've been carrying for months. When she woke up 6 hours later to the weak morning light, her first thought wasn't dread, but opportunity. The sentencing hearing, 2 weeks after the verdict, just felt like the end credits after the actual movie. Lena sat in the same court, on the same bench, but the boulder on her chest felt lighter. The story was done. This was just the final step, turning a guilty verdict into a prison sentence. The judge was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses and the kind of deep burnout you get from seeing the absolute worst of people every single day. She read the report, her face a total blank. Ethan stood there in an orange jumpsuit, cuffed, his face a practiced empty mask. His public defender made a pathetic plea for a light sentence, bringing up no prior record and a messed-up childhood. The usual script to make his brand of crazy seem less evil. In response, Patricia Reeves laid out hospital records, police reports on his restraining order fails, and texts that showed his escalating campaign of pure terror. She went over the textbook pattern of abuse, the high probability Ethan would pull this on his next target if he wasn't stopped, and the need for a sentence that actually matched the crime's brutality. The judge heard every single word, her focus absolute. Then she looked at Ethan over her glasses. "Mr. Hayes, you have been found guilty on multiple charges of assault, harassment, and stalking. The evidence presented shows a chilling pattern of escalating violence against a person you claim to love. You used your physical power to control, to terrorize, and to harm Miss Carter for months. When she found the strength to leave, you stalked her, continuing to threaten her life." Ethan's jaw went tight. Lena saw the muscle twitch, feeling only a cold, detached sense of victory that his reactions were finally being judged by someone else and were failing the test. "You are sentenced to 5 years in state prison for assault, to be followed by 2 years for stalking and harassment. That totals 7 years. With good behavior, you may be eligible for parole in 5. The judge didn't even flinch. "I am also issuing a permanent order of protection. You will make no attempt to contact Miss Carter ever again for the rest of your life. Violating this order will trigger new criminal charges. Do you understand?" "Yes." The word from Ethan was dead, but Lena could feel the rage simmering just below the surface. It was the same fury that used to paralyze her. Now it just looked weak. A grown man who never understood other people weren't just side characters in his personal drama. The bailiff led him out. Ethan never looked at her. She watched him go, a chapter closing so hard it was both a relief and a massive trip. 7 years. He'd be 43 when he got out. She would be 35. 2 completely different people on 2 completely different timelines into a future she couldn't even start to picture. Outside, the April sun was warm, making her coat feel stupid. Spring had finally arrived, the city shaking off winter. Patricia gave her a fast, professional hug, the kind a lawyer gives a client they actually came to respect. She said she'd send over copies of all the court papers for her files. "So, what's next?" Patricia asked. Lena's eyes found Adrian, who was giving them room but was close enough to intervene. "I have no idea. Learn to be normal, I guess." "You've definitely earned that. Normal, boring, whatever you want to call a life where you're not constantly checking your 6. Patricia smiled. "Take care of yourself, Lena." "I will." Marcus was there with the car. Adrian opened her door, a small move that once felt like a power flex, but she now understood was just him, offering help without needing a gold star. She sank into the leather seat, feeling the tension finally dissolve from her shoulders. "Where to?" Adrian asked, getting in beside her. Honestly, I haven't got a clue. Home? The word still felt a little off for the Tribeca apartment, but not as off as it did 2 weeks ago. It felt less like a bunker. Lena had started leaving her stuff out, not keeping a bug-out bag packed. Books on the table, her favorite mug, a plant on the windowsill she was mostly killing. Yeah, she said, home. They drove in the midday traffic, the radio playing some instrumental background noise. Lena watched the city slide by her window, trying to nail down the feeling bubbling up inside her. It wasn't happiness, it wasn't just relief either. It was way more complicated. It felt like standing on a high dive, knowing you have to jump, but you're not ready for the shock of the freezing water. Back at the apartment, Adrian put on a pot of coffee while Lena ditched her court clothes for jeans and a soft sweater he'd bought for her after seeing her wardrobe was just scrubs and 3 shredded shirts. She complained about the price tag, he just blew it off. This was their whole dynamic now. He'd offer support, she'd slowly let him, and they'd both act like it was completely casual. She found him in the kitchen, 2 coffees already made, standing by the window with that intense focus he always had. Lena had gotten freakishly good at reading a man's silence, a skill she'd beta tested on her ex, Ethan. But Adrian's quiet wasn't a ticking bomb. It was a high-speed processor running solutions. You alive over there? She probed. Shouldn't I be asking you that? Too slow, I beat you to it. Adrian rotated, and the sunlight made the gray in his hair, and the lines on his face looked 10 times worse. The dude was completely fried, and it smacked her right then. She had no idea what helping her had actually cost him in cash, time, and sanity. I'm thinking about our next move, he said, and her stomach just hit the floor. This was it. The big talk where he says she's safe now, the gig is up, and it's time to ghost the stranger who saved her. She'd been prepping for this exact moment. She'd been stacking cash from her job, hunting for tiny studios she could barely afford, mapping her whole exit strategy. I gotta tell you something, Adrian interrupted, putting his mug down. And I need you to just shut up and listen until I'm done. Okay, Lena's voice was barely a whisper. These last few months having you here. He stalled, choosing his words like a sniper. It's been a massive reality check. You showed me that some things are worth more than contracts and clients, that the real work is saving one person. Lena was completely lost, but this definitely didn't sound like he was kicking her out. Then, bam. I have feelings for you, Adrian stated. No fluff. Had 'em for a while. I kept quiet because you were in a crisis, the power dynamic was all screwed up, and you didn't need that drama. But you're not in crisis mode anymore. Ethan's caged. You're secure. You're safe. He looked straight through her. So, I'm telling you now, when you can walk away clean, that I care about you way more than a guy should after less than 6 months. And I have to know if there's any shot you feel it too. Lena's heart was hammering her ribs. She put her coffee down before she dropped it. I don't know what I feel, she said, just laying it all out. Is this real, or just some messed up trauma bond? My judgment with guys is shot. I can't tell the difference between a good dude and just the next psycho in line. He shot back? That's fair, but I think about you when you're gone. I sleep better knowing you're safe next door. You make me laugh. You don't treat me like a project. Plus, I've started planning my whole week around your schedule. She paused. I don't know if that's love or just dependency, but it's definitely something. Adrian got quiet. Then let's figure it out. No clock, no pressure. You can stay or get your own place for breathing room. We could try actual dates, normal things like dinner and movies, and talks that aren't about legal tactics. We just see what happens now that the war is over. What if I'm a wreck? What if I have breakdowns? Then we handle it. I've got my own issues, Lena. You've lived here for months. You've seen the insomnia, the control freak stuff, the fact I trust like 3 people and have doomsday plans. He cracked a tiny smile. We're both damaged goods. Maybe we can be damaged together. Lena actually looked at him, and all the little clues she'd ignored finally slammed into place. The way he made her coffee perfectly without her ever saying a word. The books by authors she mentioned that would just appear out of nowhere. How he protected her without ever being a controlling jerk, always giving her an out. I want to try, she said. I'm scared as hell and probably not ready, but I want to try. Scared is smart. What if I break you? What if you don't? Lena actually laughed, the sound shocking her. Is that your motto? Just bet on the best outcome? No, I plan for the apocalypse and hope for the best. But with you, Adrian said, stepping closer, I'm willing to risk it. She closed the final inches between them. It wasn't some Hollywood kiss, it was clumsy and unsure. She bonked his nose and had to readjust. But it was real, and it was her call. When they pulled back, Adrian was actually smiling, his stoic mask totally gone. So, he said, dinner, a proper date. I know a spot with scallops that'll change your life. Are you always this dramatic about food? Only when I'm trying to impress a girl. So they went to dinner. Lena wore a dress bought with her own money. She felt like a powerhouse, in shoes not made for running. The restaurant was low-key, but they knew Adrian's name. They talked about anything except the nightmare. He told her about his Queen's childhood and how his brother's murder put him on his current path. In return, Lena opened up about the foster system, the teachers who believed in her, and the small victory of nailing a tough IV line. It was so normal, it was mind-blowing. Walking home, Lena felt like she could actually exist in the city without looking over her shoulder. Lena reached out and took his hand just to see. It felt easy, like they'd done it 1,000 times. Can I ask you something? She said. Always. That night, the subway. Why me? You could have just kept walking like everyone else. Adrian went silent for a whole city block. You looked, he finally said, like someone who forgot they were allowed to fall. Like you'd been holding it together for so long that collapsing felt like a personal failure. He paused. And I know that feeling. Pretending you're solid when you're just dust. And I looked at you and saw the 17-year-old kid I used to be, and I just couldn't walk away. I'm so glad you didn't. Me too. They took the stairs to her place, a tiny way she was reclaiming her strength. Inside, everything was finally safe. Do you want me to stay? Adrian asked, his voice low. Or should I give you some breathing room? Lena actually thought about it, separating what she wanted from what she thought she should want. Stay, she decided. But guest room. I'm not ready for anything more yet. That works perfectly. In the following weeks, they got into a groove. Adrian would stay over a few nights, always in the guest room, respecting her rules. They went on dates to museums, movies, and a comedy club that made Lena actually cry from laughing. They cooked, fought about whether cilantro is gross, and found out they both loved the same trashy reality shows. Lena went back to therapy, not the forced kind, but real work, digging deep with a doctor who let her heal on her own timeline. They started unpacking 8 months of pure hell, a 2-year relationship that was poison from the start, and a childhood that taught her that getting close was a death sentence. It was slow, ugly work, the kind of healing you don't notice until you look back at the canyon you just crossed. For the first time in forever, she was sleeping through the night. She was eating without worrying if a meal would set Ethan off. Her choices were finally hers again. Over at the hospital, her boss noticed the total vibe shift. "Whatever you're doing, Carter, keep it up. You look like a human being again, not a ghost haunting the ER." Lena let out a real laugh. Thanks, I guess. No, for real, you're sharper, you're present. I don't know what switched on, but it's working. What switched on was everything, but Lena just chalked it up to more sleep. Then June hit, turning the city into a hot, sticky mess. Adrian's Arctic Blast apartment became her main hideout. One Saturday, they're sprawled on his sofa, fan roaring, arguing about food until they just ordered both. "So, I've been thinking," Adrian said, breaking the silence. "A dangerous pastime. No, seriously. I've been thinking about my company's whole mission." Lena turned to face him. "I'm changing the entire business model, ditching the corporate gigs and focusing on protecting people who can't afford it. Survivors, people escaping hell. We're talking safe houses, paying for their court fees. Real help." "Dude, that's a massive change." "It's the only work that feels right. The corporate gigs gave me enough cash to run it for years, and He stopped. "Meeting you, it reminded me why I started this thing. Protection isn't about guarding some rich dude's mansion. It's about letting people live without fear." A crazy warmth just exploded in Lena's chest. "You're going to help other people, people just like me." "I'm gonna try. I want to build the exact thing that should have existed for you, so no one else has to break down on a subway platform and bet their life on a random stranger." "Sounds like a terrible business model," she joked. "Good thing I'm not in it for the money." Lena pulled him into a long, deep kiss, one that said everything she couldn't yet. When she pulled away, his eyes were on fire. "Move in with me," he said, the words sharp as a blade. "Not as a rescue case, as my partner. We can figure out the small stuff, like who has worse taste in art. But I want you here because this is where you choose to be, not because you have no other choice." "I have other choices now," Lena reminded him. "I found a few apartments I can afford." "I know, I saw the browser history on your laptop." "And you're still asking?" "I'm asking because I need to wake up knowing you're right next door. I want to come home to your shoes by the entrance and your mug in the sink. I want to build a life with you that's completely switched off from crisis mode." Lena's throat clenched up. "But what if it's a bust? What if we find out we only clicked during an emergency?" "Then we deal, like grown-ups." "Look, I'd rather bet everything on us and lose than live my entire life wondering what if." "You are way too OP when you turn on the charm." "So, you saying it's working?" Lena thought about the depressing little studios she'd scouted with their sad, tiny kitchens. She saw the life she had mapped out, safe, walled off, constantly having to prove she was tough enough. It was a solid plan, a safe one. But she was clocking the fact that safe and happy weren't even in the same universe. "Yeah," she breathed out. "It's working, I'll stay." The absolute nuclear-grade smile that exploded across Adrian's face was worth every last bit of her doubt. They celebrated by demolishing the Thai and Italian takeout that showed up, ate way too much, and then crashed on the couch in a knot that promised major aches in the morning. Lena's eyes popped open around 3 a.m., totally disoriented, her neck screaming bloody murder. Adrian was dead to the world, arm thrown over her waist, his breathing heavy and even. She could have bailed, found her bed, and thrown that defensive wall right back up. Instead, she just sank back into his warmth and let her eyes drift shut again. The nightmare reruns didn't pop up as often now. And when they did, someone was right there to gently reboot her system, to pull her back to reality and remind her the final boss was defeated. She was actually allowed to be at peace. Safety was no longer a resource she had to grind for. July hit with a record-shattering heat wave, turning the entire city into a miserable, sweaty mess. Lena started hoarding extra shifts at work, stacking cash she didn't even need as a buffer against the what-ifs. Adrian officially dropped his company's new division, Safe Haven Solutions, a name Lena found a little on the nose, but she kept that opinion to herself. Their first client was a woman, Maria, whose husband had sent her to the ER twice. Adrian's team ghosted her and her 2 kids to a safe house, hooked her up with a killer lawyer, and got the divorce papers filed. Lena watched him quarterback the whole op with the same ice-cold precision he'd shown her, running the pure belief that no one was ever a lost cause. "You're a monster at this," she told him after a 14-hour marathon. "It's not enough. There are thousands of people trapped in your old spot, and I can maybe help a few dozen." "Dozens is better than 0. "It doesn't feel like it's enough." Lena knew that feeling down to her bones, the soul-crushing math of small wins against a tsunami of suck. But her job taught her, you don't save the world. You save the person right in front of you. You do what's possible, she said, her voice soft. You help who you can reach. For everyone else, you have to hope another player is there to make the save, just like you did for me. Adrian pulled her into a hug, digging his face into her hair. "When did you get so damn smart?" "Always have been," she muttered. "You just started paying attention." August arrived, marking 6 months since the subway incident. Lena wasn't trying to keep score, but some part of her brain was running a clock. 6 months of quiet, 6 months of learning a gentle hand wasn't a wind-up for a fist. 6 months of building a life that felt legit, something she figured was impossible post-Ethan. They were in a grocery store, a place so painfully normal it once felt like a PvP zone when a ghost appeared. Not Ethan. That psycho was securely rotting in a concrete cell, his parole date some laughable number in the distant future. No, this was one of his fanboys, Derek. The guy who was there on night 1, the one who later told the story of her terror like it was the funniest stand-up routine he'd ever seen. Derek's eyes locked onto hers, and his recognition soured into something foul. His voice cut through the store's low hum, loud and disgusting. "Well, would you look at that? Ethan's lying little groupie?" Heads swiveled in their direction. "Heard you got him put away. Must feel great. Wrecking a good man's life over a few rough nights." Lena's heart tried to punch its way out of her chest. The old programming screamed at her to shrink, to apologize, to de-escalate before she got burned. But that version of her was also a ghost. "He wrecked his own life with his own 2 hands, she fired back, her voice like a steel wire pulled taut over a canyon of pure adrenaline. "I just reported the facts." He sneered. "He gave you everything." "He gave me bruises," she shot back, "and 8 months of being a prisoner in my own home." Lena moved toward him, not away. "So, yeah, I talked. I told them what he did, and I would do it again without blinking." A nasty red flush crawled up Derek's neck. He lunged for her, but then a shadow shifted, and bam! Adrian was just there, a silent wall between her and the past. "Step back," Adrian said, his voice way too calm, and it froze Derek mid-stride. You're going to turn around, take your crap, and leave. If you ever talk to her again, or even look her way, I will personally teach you the definition of regret." His words were a quiet promise. Derek finally got a real look at Adrian then. Not just his size, but the chilling stillness that promised a level of violence his own loud mouth couldn't touch. Whatever he saw in that stillness made him instantly fold. Whatever. She ain't worth it. And like that, he was gone. Adrian stood guard until the creep was out of sight. "You good?" Lena's hands were vibrating, but her voice was solid steel. "I am." I faced him. I didn't say sorry, not once, not like the girl from 6 months ago. "You were epic." "I was freaking out," she whispered. "Courage and panic are basically the same thing." The ride home was completely silent. The fear didn't really die down until the door was locked behind them. But she'd done it. She had faced a monster from her old life and held her ground. It was proof. The healing wasn't just some concept. It was a core part of her now. That night, in the comfortable quiet they had created, Lena made her play. "I want you to stay," she said, letting the words hang in the air. "Not in the spare room, with me." Adrian just looked at her, really taking her in. "You sure?" "I'm positive. I've been sure. I was just too chicken shit to say it, but I'm so over being afraid." "I want to choose things because I want them," she continued, "not because fear is making the choice for me." "Okay," he said. Just one word, but it held a universe of patience. Zero pressure. "If you change your mind, just tell me." And so they started to move with a careful rhythm, learning the language of trust in the quiet spaces, far away from the noise of the past. Look, the past still jumps her sometimes, when a simple touch feels like a trap, and she has to nope out just to get air. But Adrian is a mountain of pure patience, and she's finally learning to give herself the same damn grace. Bit by bit, the fear is losing ground, making room for other things. For wanting. For the insane risk of letting someone see your messed up wiring and trusting they won't use it against you. Later, stretched out in the dark with his arms securely around her, she felt it. A vibe she thought had been permanently deleted from her hard drive. Peace. Not because the damage was gone, but because she knew for a fact that she was right here by her own choice with the one guy who saw her at her absolute worst and didn't even flinch. "I love you," she whispered into the silence, the words feeling massive and new. His arm tightened around her. "I love you too. Even though my entire life has been a dumpster fire." "You're not a dumpster fire," he said, his voice locked on target. "You're a survivor who's building an empire from the wreckage. That's a whole different ball game." "You're just saying that because you love me." "I'm saying it because it's the damn truth," he murmured, kissing her shoulder. "And also, yeah, because I love you." A smile bloomed on her face in the darkness, and she passed out in his arms, her dreams full of the raw potential of tomorrow instead of yesterday's ghosts. September arrived, bringing that new semester vibe to New York. Lena stood at their apartment window. Officially their spot now, her name on the lease for 2 whole weeks, and watched the sunrise paint the city gold. Behind her, Adrian was moving in the kitchen, the daily rhythm of a life they were composing together, one beat at a time. She had finally stopped grabbing every single extra shift at the hospital. She was actually starting to say no. She was defending her own sanity, just like her shrink had been telling her to. The hospital was her fortress and her prison. She almost went down for that place, and it nearly wiped her out completely. "Coffee's up," Adrian called. She turned, and there he was, 2 mugs in hand, his hair a total mess from sleep. This Adrian, the unguarded, relaxed guy in the soft t-shirt, this was the version that had her completely. More than the CEO, more than the white knight. This was just Adrian, and he was hers. She snagged the mug and planted one on him. Lawyer meeting ETA? 10. Gives us 2 hours to rent the playbook. The foundation was his angle, a way to build a legacy out of the chaos. Safe haven, a spot to offer everything Lena never had. Legal muscle, a roof, a shrink, a way out. The nonprofit paperwork was filed. Today, the whole operation was a go. I can't even wrap my head around this, Lena said, her voice electric. That wasn't doubt, y'all. It was pure, unfiltered shock. A year ago, she muttered. I was crashing on subways, too scared to go home. Now I'm launching a whole foundation. It feels unreal. He dropped his coffee and pulled her into a hug. You survived a war zone and built a beacon for others. It's not unreal. It's the most gangster thing I've ever seen. When did you get so damn optimistic? She asked his shirt. I'm not. I'm a realist who fell for a woman proving good things are actually possible. She inhaled his scent, coffee, clean laundry, just him. Home wasn't a place. It was a person. They spent the morning buried in docks. Lena scanned every last line. She'd wasted too much of her life signing stuff she didn't get, trusting the wrong crew. She drilled them with questions, made notes, stepped up as a true partner, claiming her space. The meeting was a blowout win. By noon, Safe Haven was a legit thing. With Lena's name as co-founder, the title felt heavy, like a jacket that was still too big. But she was getting it. You don't wait to be ready. You just wear the jacket and grow into it. Lunch? Adrian asked as they hit the city streets. Celebration time. Got a better idea, she shot back. We're hitting the subway. He looked confused but didn't argue. There's a place I gotta see. They rode the train to 103rd Street. She hadn't been on this platform in a year. She'd been avoiding it hard like it was a damn grave. But she was done running. It looked identical. The grimy tile, the smell of burnt steel, the rumble of an incoming train. The memory was right there, waiting. Lena walked to the exact spot she fell, where 8 months of terror finally dragged her down. This is where you caught me, she said, her voice low but solid. I was so freaked out that night. I thought the worst thing ever was eating this filthy floor. She spun to face him. But the worst thing would have been no one showing up. The worst thing was going home, staying stuck because I couldn't imagine anything else. He started to say she'd have found a way out. Maybe, she said, cutting him off. Or maybe I'd just be another number, another girl who stayed too long. And this isn't for some dramatic scene, she explained, her voice fragile. I just had to say thank you for catching me, for holding on, for showing me what real help looks like. No strings attached. Adrian's whole posture softened. You'll never owe me for that. I know, but I had to say it right here, where it all started. A train rolled in, and people flowed around them like water. Lena watched them pass. Just people out here living their lives, every one of them holding their own secret wars, their private victories, their normal days. A year ago, she was just one of them. Any one of them could be ready to snap. And that was the whole point of their foundation, right? So nobody has to just collapse and hope a stranger looks down. They chilled on the platform, then headed back into the city. The city was in its afternoon slump, the pace slower, the vibe warmer. It was that energy after the lunch chaos, before the evening insanity kicks in. Lena and Adrian just walked, letting the blocks blur by in a cool silence. only broken by shots at street performers, the constant construction, and who the hell pays $15 for juice. Back at their apartment, Lena got into her gym gear for the self-defense class she started in July. Adrian had suggested it carefully, knowing any fight could be a major trigger. But Lena felt a raw need to know how to fight, to learn a language of protection that wasn't about someone else's rescue. The class was all women, run by an ex-military instructor who understood that for survivors, this was about taking your power back. "I can grab you when you're done," Adrian offered. "You don't have to. The subway's fine." "I know I don't have to," he said gently. "I want to." Lena leaned in and kissed him. "Fine, but only 'cause it's on your way." The class was savage. 90 minutes of learning how to throw a punch, how to use someone's weight against them, how to override the freeze instinct and just attack. Lena walked out soaked in sweat, body humming with adrenaline, feeling a power that didn't need anyone's permission. Adrian was parked at the curb. She jumped in the passenger seat and started breaking down the lesson, showing him a palm strike that made him flinch. "Making a note," he said with a smile, "never get you mad." "You couldn't. You're too damn reasonable." "Give it time," he shot back. "I'm sure I'll find a way to be annoying." They scooped up Thai food on the way home from the usual spot where the owner knew their names and threw in extra spring rolls. These small routines, this normal existence, it was the kind of awesome, boring life Lena thought she'd never see again. After dinner, she was still wired. Too much energy from class, too many thoughts about the foundation, about what was coming, about the insane luck of building a life from total ruins. "Let's walk," she said. They wound up back at Battery Park, where they'd stood on verdict day. The city was a grid of light and sound. Ferries sliced through the black water. Tourists snapped pics of the Statue of Liberty, her torch a steady light in the night. "I've been thinking about something," Lena said quietly. "Should I be worried?" "I want to go back to school. Not yet, maybe in a year. But I want to get a teaching certificate, elementary school like I planned before things got messy." Adrian smiled. He's like, "You'd be an incredible teacher," but she's all doubt, saying, "Or a total disaster. I have no idea if I can handle 25 kids and all that parent-teacher drama." He replies, "So just try it. Worst case, it's not for you, and you dip. Best case, you love it and become a legend for the next 30 years. She asks, "When did you become my personal hype squad?" He hits her with the singer. "The second your dreams returned and you quit just surviving. That's when I knew you'd started to actually live." Lena just leaned on the rail, watching the water. A year ago, dreams were a joke. Survival was the only goal. And now, she's thinking about grad school and new jobs, a future beyond the next 12 hours. Then, bam. "I'm pregnant," she says. Those 2 words just delete all the oxygen. Lena didn't mean to drop the bomb like that, a random confession in a park. But the secret was at critical mass. Beside her, Adrian goes completely rigid. "What?" she repeats. "I'm pregnant, about 6 weeks. I used a test this morning on Luis, then a second one. Both lit up positive." She finally turns to him. "Look, we never discussed kids. I know this is a shock. If you're not ready or don't want this, I get it, and we can figure." "Lena." Adrian's voice just cuts through her spiral. "Are you happy about this?" That question just floors her. She's thinking about raising a kid in this messed up world, if she's even sane enough to be a mom, and all the ways she's gonna screw this up. But under all that panic was something else, a feeling that was a lot like hope. "Yeah," she whispers. I'm happy, terrified, but happy. Then I'm happy too. Adrian yanks her into a hug, his heart hammering. We're having a baby. She's still trying to process it. Are you serious? Because this is huge. And you never signed up for... I signed up for you. He cuts in. Everything you are, everything you build, every crazy plot twist this life serves up. I'm in, Lena. I'm all in. The tears finally break loose, and she sobs on his shoulder with relief and joy and the wild fact that she's going to be a mother, ready to give more than she ever got. Adrienne just holds her, a total rock, the anchor she needed. Gotta spill the beans, she says. The crew, my work people. Doc Shapiro needs the intel. It's a lot. We've got time, he counters. We go public when you give the green light. They headed home in the dark, hands locked, plotting about babies and turning the guest room into a tactical nursery. The whole thing was insane, terrifying, and felt dead on right. The next few months were a montage of doc appointments and all-day morning sickness, while Adrienne mainlined pregnancy books like they were intel briefings. Lena broke the news to her boss at Mount Sinai, who high-fived her, then immediately started mapping out her maternity leave. She also hit up Dr. Shapiro, who just grinned and said this was the kind of chaos that keeps his job interesting. The foundation had its grand opening that November with a low-key party and a media swarm that made Lena's skin crawl. She hated her face being splashed in the news next to domestic violence headlines propped up like some symbol when all she did was not get killed. But Adrienne reminded her that her story was a signal flare for other people. It proved escape was possible, that a life could be rebuilt from the ground up. They got their first client that same week, a woman named Sarah, whose boyfriend gave her a busted jaw and 3 cracked ribs. Lena sat with her at the hospital, held her hand while she filed the police report, and showed her that pressing charges wasn't a betrayal. It was a counterattack. Watching Sarah get into a safe house, seeing her slowly realize she deserved to be safe, Lena finally got why they built this fortress. She saw how her own personal hell could be someone else's escape hatch. December came in with a blizzard and that psycho holiday energy only New York can deliver. At 16 weeks pregnant, the nausea finally bailed, and her body was leveling up in ways that were both trippy and awesome. Adrienne had gone full-on bodyguard over her health, locking down her meal schedule, keeping her stress levels low, and acting like she was made of freaking crystal. I'm pregnant, not a shattered vase, she told him, after he snatched a grocery bag that weighed maybe 10 pounds. I know, he shot back, but you're carrying our asset, so I'm allowed to be overprotective. There's a line between protective and just straight up insane. Yeah, and I'll do my best to find it. They did Christmas with the tight-knit crew they now called family. Marcus and his wife, Patricia Reeves, who became a solid ally after the trial, and some of Adriana's security guys who helped pull Lena out of the fire. There was no blood family, because neither had any left that wasn't pure poison. But a found family can be just as real. Lena's best loot was from Adrienne, a leather journal with her initials burned into the cover. To log the mission, he explained. Your thoughts, your fears, the intel you might want our kid to have someday about our crazy story. I know you're not a journal person, but I figured you'd want a record of this op. She started logging that night. Not every day, but when the mood hit, she'd drop notes on the big and small stuff. Being sick at 0300, the first time the baby moved, a text from Sarah saying she filed for divorce and felt like herself again. January hit, marking 1 full year since that night on the subway platform. Lena woke up before the sun, Adrian out cold beside her. She just laid there in the dark, processing how much the board had changed. 1 year ago, she was a terrified, broken mess, convinced her game was over. Now she was building an empire, carrying a baby, and living a life so much bigger than she ever imagined. It felt like she was watching someone else's highlight reel sometimes. She slipped out of bed, trying not to wake Adrian, and went to the windows. The city was just starting to grind. The early birds, the supply trucks, the nonstop pulse of New York City. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah. 1 month in the new place. Woke up without being scared for the first time. You showed me this was real. A small smile hit Lena's face as she texted back. You took the shot. I just held the flashlight. Adrian found her there 20 minutes later, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunrise. You good? He asked. Better than good. Just thinking about how everything's different. Any regrets? Not a single damn one. He sat with her as they watched the morning come online. A foundation briefing was on the schedule in a few hours, a baby in a few months. And after that, the mission profile wasn't written yet. But Lena wasn't scared of the future anymore. She'd learned you can rebuild from rubble, that love doesn't have to be a weapon, and that getting knocked down doesn't mean you're out of the fight. February dropped a letter she never saw coming. Prison letterhead, with Ethan's name as the sender. Lena held it for a solid minute, with Adrian's hawk eyes on her from the kitchen. The words inside were shockingly sane. Court-ordered therapy, he said, was actually working. He was apologizing, not asking to be forgiven, but owning what he did. He got why she fought back, was glad she was free, and hoped she found a good life. I'm not sure why I'm writing this, the letter finished. You don't owe me a reply. You don't owe me a thing. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to be better than the monster who broke you. Not for you, for whoever I am after this. I'm sorry for all of it, Lena. You deserved better. You always did. Lena put the letter down, feeling only a quiet, final kind of closure. This was probably the best he could manage. Own his disaster, try to fix himself, and leave her the hell alone. It would never fix the damage, never delete 8 months of terror. But it was an ending. You gonna write back? Adrian asked. No, he's right. I don't owe him a damn thing. But I hope he gets help. I hope he actually changes. She dropped the letter in the trash. No big scene, no ceremony. She just folded it and let it go with the junk. Some ghosts don't get to take up space in your life. Not anymore. March blew in with warmer weather and Lena's 3rd trimester. She had to scale back her hours at the hospital. Her body just couldn't hang with 12-hour shifts anymore. Her back was killing her from being on her feet, but her work at the foundation was blowing up. She was now training new recruits, designing programs, and building something that would outlast her. And they found out it was a girl. Adrian straight up shattered when the tech dropped the news. No holding back the waterworks. Lena clowned him about it for days. Look, I got a right to be shook, he shot back. We're having a daughter, a tiny operative using my bladder for target practice. She's gonna be a legend, your fire, your guts, and your trash taste in reality TV. Hey, my bachelor obsession is all on you. I only watch that train wreck with you. Don't even try it. They went to war over names for weeks. He wanted something classic. She wanted a name with some heavy history. They settled on Elena Grace, close enough to Lena's own name to be a legacy, but different enough for the kid to make her own mark. They picked Grace for the middle name, a dark joke about the one thing they got when they should have gotten a bullet. April exploded with cherry blossoms and the raw energy of a city gearing up for a fight. At 36 weeks, Lena felt like a battleship, counting down the days with a mix of hype and pure dread. She wasn't just reading parenting books. She was devouring tactical manuals Adrian brought home, running birth drills, and prepping for the insane op of bringing a new player into the game. But late at night, with Adrian out cold, Lena was still terrified. Terrified she couldn't be the commander this kid needed, that she couldn't break the cycle of violence from her past. Dr. Shapiro told her the paranoia was a good sign, that knowing where the mines are helps you not step on them. You extracted yourself, Shapiro had told her. You built a new empire from nothing. You're basically writing the new playbook on how to pull others from the fire. Trust that the same grit that got you here will make you a warrior of a mother. But what if I mess her up? You will. Every parent screws up. The mission isn't perfection, it's survival and repair. You'll hurt her, you'll debrief and learn. You'll make a bad call, you'll own it, and you'll adapt. That's how the cycle gets broken. Lena clung to that intel on the long nights. She could do that. The first signal came on a Tuesday morning. Lena was fortifying the nest when the alert hit her. Not pain, just a pressure that made her freeze. "Adrian," she called out. "I think it's go time." He was there in a flash, grabbing the go bag that had been packed and ready for 3 weeks. "What's the timetable?" That was the first one. "We got time. Hours, maybe." "We should roll out now." "We should wait till they're closer, per the doc's orders." "Or we could leave now and secure the location." Lena cracked a smile through the tension. "You're losing your tactical cool." "I'm being prudent." "You're panicking. It's kinda cute." They compromised. They waited till the signals were 10 minutes apart before heading to Mount Sinai, the same hospital where Lena had run ops for years, the one place she had home field advantage. The staff knew her on site, getting her into a secure room with the calm precision of people who see high-stakes plays go down every single day. The books didn't prepare her for this. Labor was a brutal, ugly war that no metaphor could touch. Lena had seen other women go through this battle, but living it was a whole other level of hell. She finally got the war cries. Adrian never left his post, gripping her hand, running comms for her, and never flinching when she blamed him for this whole mess. "You did this to me," she gasped between attacks. "I know, my bad, you're a beast. I love you. I hate you right now." "Fair enough." 18 hours later, Elena Grace Valente announced her arrival with a battle cry. They put her on Lena's chest, a tiny, fierce creature, brand new and absolutely perfect. Lena glares at her daughter and feels a fuse blow in her head. It's a love so savage, it's a threat, a kill or be killed instinct that makes all her old fears look like a joke. "Hey, little soldier," she mutters. "I'm your handler. I'll screw up, but I swear I'll burn the world down for you. Bank on it." Elena's transmissions went silent, her optics trying to lock on Lena's face. Adrian moves in, his hand on Lena's shoulder, just staring at their kid like she's the ultimate prize. "She's perfect," he whispers. "She's our win." The next 2 days are a lockdown blur. Learning the rhythms of refueling, sanitation, and decoding the intel from her cries. The extraction from the hospital felt like a fever dream. Walking through their own front door with a high-value asset in a carrier was nuts. They put Elena in her dock and just stood watch, staring at her like she was a live bomb that would detonate if they blinked. "We're officially operational," Lena says, the words landing like a gut punch. "Yeah, we're in it," Adrian echoes. Total chaos. The first weeks were a frantic scramble of feeding ops and grabbing sleep in 90-minute shifts. Lena knew she'd be attached to the kid. She never expected the gut-wrenching terror that came with it. The constant system checks to make sure Elena was still online. The paranoia over every little ping. The sheer weight of knowing this small person's entire existence relied on her not fumbling the mission. But she and Adrian found their rhythm. They ran shifts so the other could power down. They called for backup when they were in the red zone. They learned that new recruits are tougher than they look and that loyalty can plug the gaps left by bad intelligence. The Foundation was booming, with Lena running point from her home base. She'd hired a full-time operator, Michelle, a former agent who knew the system and the scars that came with it. Together, they had exfiltrated 43 people from impossible situations since the Foundation went live. That's 43 new identities, 43 souls who wouldn't have to hit rock bottom and pray for a rescue. Summer hit the city like a blowtorch. Elena, at 3 months, was already tracking them, a real operative emerging from the tiny asset. Lena would take her to the park, making a strange pact with the other shell-shocked mothers, trading war stories about sleep deprivation and supply chain issues. She had finally stopped waiting for the next attack, stopped thinking peace was just a lull in the fighting. This was her turf now. A mess, but built from the ashes of her past. The August air was heavy over the 103rd Street platform, Ground Zero. Elena was strapped to her chest, Adrian a solid presence at her 6, right on the spot where her world imploded. "Why here?" he asks. Elena needs to know her origin story, she says. Not the hospital, the exact point I stopped running and let someone pull me out. Lena looks at her daughter, whose eyes were fixed on the tunnel's lights. She thinks one day I'll give her the full debrief about that night, about being so far gone I saw no way out, and how he became my extraction point. The story would sound cheesy, she knew, but Elena would understand that sometimes you have to get taken out to start the real war. She would learn that the right fire team can change the entire outcome. Lena faced Adrian, a core mission truth hitting hard. Love wasn't a weapon, it was the objective. He kissed her forehead. You did the real work. Maybe, she whispered. But you laid down cover fire for the rebuild, and that's everything. A train's roar tore through the moment as they boarded. This wasn't a trip. It was a quiet declaration of war. Lena needed this run with her unit to prove she could. The same rails that once launched her into a nightmare now just ferried her across a city she had taken back. They rolled north to Washington Heights, gliding past the station that marked her old prison. As they passed the stop, there was no sting, just the cold satisfaction of a mission accomplished. The haunted girl from that apartment was a ghost, replaced by a woman who knew that just making it out alive isn't the same as winning. That evening, Lena opened the logbook he'd given her. Its pages were filled with intel from her new life, but the main mission objective was still blank. Until tonight. The pen started moving. My dearest Elena, when you read this, you'll know that mission briefings are always full of lies. You'll know the story of the platform and of your father being the one to drag me from the wreckage. But the real kickoff was way before that. Right when I decided I was too good for the hellhole I was in, the second I chose to fight back instead of caving. You spawned from that one call, from a life I torched and rebuilt, from power I seized back, and from a loyalty I finally bet on. You're not some byproduct of my trauma. You're living proof that your history doesn't write your destiny. Your dad and I are both walking disasters. We're gonna mess up. We'll fail you on the small things and, God forbid, never the major ops. but we will always have your back with a brutal, non-negotiable certainty. We'll teach you that falling is standard procedure, that calling for reinforcement is smart, and that you owe zero loyalty to any place trying to erase you. We'll be your case study on how two broken-down bats can build a kingdom from the rubble. So check it. She's looking at her kid, Elena, and sees the whole damn prize. Her, this new empire they're building, and the underground network yanking people out of the fire. This isn't a recovery mission. It's a victory lap. This is what winning looks like. Scarred as hell, but she chose it, and it was worth every single gut-wrenching second. The letter from her mom basically says, "Can't wait to see the boss you become, building a new world with the freedom we fought for. Welcome to the chaos, kid. It's savage, but it's ours." And boom, Lena slams the book shut. You can feel the legacy lock into place. Outside, the city is buzzing with a million different ops. Some trapped, some free, all fighting for the next sunrise. She hit her sunrise, then blew right past it, building a life they swore couldn't exist. That night, she's not rerunning old nightmares, she's planning the next offensive. Elena's first drills, their foundation's influence exploding from dozens to hundreds. Even holidays are a show of force with the crew she built. This isn't peace, it's her cementing a dynasty. She wakes up, and Adrian's already on watch with Elna, his voice a low frequency meant only for the kid. Lena watches from the shadows, her future and the guy who was her extraction team. That gratitude hits different now. It's a core part of her power. This isn't some sappy ending. It's the silence after you burn your old world down and build a new one on its ashes. So this is it. Life. A total disaster, broken but absolutely legendary. And Lena Carter, the survivor, the mother, the founder who weaponized her own hell into a beacon for everyone else, she wasn't just getting by anymore. She was finally 100% running the whole damn operation.